Geospatial science and GIS are becoming increasingly sought after in nearly every geoscience industry and even non-science industries. But what is geospatial science and GIS? What does one do in this career? Well, in this video, I got to speak with geospatial scientist and GIS specialist Reyer Fenoff. And spoiler alert, you guys, this one threw me for a loop. I honestly thought this stuff would kind of bore me, given the very, very minimal exposure I had to GIS in school. But this stuff is so cool. I mean, who doesn't want to work with drones? Okay, but anyway, I won't give any more of what he goes into away. So without further ado, let's get to the conversation.
My name is Reyer Fenoff. I am in North Dakota with the Public Service Commission, which is one of the state agencies, and I get to do a little bit with coal mining regulation, abandoned mine lands program, and public utilities. And my position, more specifically, is geospatial scientist. I am essentially in charge of a lot of the data collection in the field with drones, survey equipment, and then also bringing that data back to the office, doing some post-processing, and then kind of database management once we get it to where we need it to be, keeping things updated, making them available to other people throughout the agency and often to the public.
Oh my gosh, it already sounds super cool with drones and everything. I love that. We'll get more into precisely what you do later. But first, we had a lot of viewers, including myself, that I don't know a lot about this. So let's just answer the most common viewer question, which was in very simple terms, what is geospatial science and GIS?
I would say if you kind of break down the word geospatial, it's basically spaces of Earth. And with science, it's studying the spaces of Earth. So that's essentially what we're doing relative to the applications that we need the data for. We're looking for, the sizes and shapes and features of abandoned mines in the abandoned mine lands program. We're looking for different parameters in active mines to try to regulate what's happening and making sure that they're being compliant. But in a general sense, geospatial science is just studying the different spaces based on whatever application or area that you're looking for, what you're looking to get out of it. And GIS is Geographic Information Systems. So that's basically the way that we analyze and visualize the data that we collect in the field.
Oh, what a simple way of putting it. That's so helpful for me for context. I took GIS classes and I haven't gone into the research side of things. I don't ever interact with it anymore. So I'm going into this, I was like, what is really the difference there? But that makes a lot more sense. So for you specifically, what does your typical day or week look like on the job? And do you ever get to go out in the field with a drone or something, or is it mainly on the computer?
So generally I am in the office, but there is quite a bit of field work. It's construction season based. So, April-ish, depending on the weather here in North Dakota, you never really know, but April to September, October, there's definitely more field work, usually 1 to 2 days a week, but I've had weeks where I was out in the field 4 or 5 days a week as well. But overall, especially during the winter, it's mostly office work. I really enjoy getting to do both the data collection in the field and then the post-processing back in the office. But overall, it's a good mix of going out in the field, collecting data with drone survey equipment, or sometimes just with your phone taking pictures of something, and then bringing that back in and trying to produce a deliverable or save it to some database or something like that.
That's so cool. I didn't know there was that much field work involved. That sounds actually really fun. Oh my gosh. And then you get to go play with it, back in the office and see what you did. Oh, that's really cool. So most of the people I have on talking about, obviously, geoscience careers, the answer to this next question is normally that it was a winding path to get to geoscience, mostly because it's not really something that, we're taught at a young age and are dreaming of, like being an astronaut or anything. But for you, was this always the plan? What initially inspired you or interested you in this field? How'd you get here?
It definitely wasn't a straight path. I had a lot of interest growing up. The one thing that kind of sticks out in my brain was there was a National Geographic magazine about the Yellowstone supervolcano that I saw when I was a kid, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years old, and couldn't understand most of what I was reading, but the pictures were super cool. So that excited me a lot and kind of got the idea in my head. And then through all the different things and changing my mind 10 times, I ended up going to school originally for geological engineering and found that I didn't have a lot of interest in the engineering side. So I ended up fine-tuning my degree into geology, and then that kind of brought me into the world that I'm in now. I was contracting, doing some, hands-on work, grunt work, dirty work, whatever you want to call it, before I was here. And I got a little bit of exposure to the survey equipment and drones and a little bit of the software, and that was something that I really enjoyed. So this position was kind of perfect for me in the sense that I got to focus on that.
Oh, yeah. I would also find it hard to not go into something where they let me use drones. That is really
Exactly.
awesome. So, kind of getting more into that stuff, on your LinkedIn, I saw that you work with GPS, GNSS, which I don't even know what that is, Lidar, and photogrammetry. So, can you briefly explain what these are and how you use them?
Yeah, just like most other fields, there's a lot of jargon and a lot of acronyms. So I'll just go down the list. So GPS is Global Positioning Systems. And so essentially what that is the US set of satellites that are in the atmosphere that we use to, whether it's on your phone or an actual GPS device or all the different things that have GPS now, cars, whatever it may be. It's what we actually use to triangulate your position on the Earth. And it's like I said, that's all US based. That's where the difference comes in with GNSS. GNSS is Global Navigation Satellite Systems, the same as GPS, but that includes all of the satellite systems across the world from all the different nations and all
Oh.
of those in the atmosphere. So GNSS is generally better and more accurate if you're using that with survey equipment versus what's on your phone. That's why you can get, sometimes sub-centimeter accuracy with survey equipment that you're not going to get on a phone because it can access every satellite essentially that's used for GNSS in the sky, whether it's from Russia or France or, Spain or China, whoever it may be. I don't know all the laws about, if there are any regulations regarding that kind of stuff, but that's essentially the difference. And then moving on, LiDAR is light detection and ranging. Essentially, LiDAR is a device with a scanner that shoots lasers in all different directions, and it measures distances to objects based on the amount of time it takes for those laser shots to return. So it's very similar to radar in that way, but it's used terrestrially, and there's some types of LiDAR that can penetrate water. I don't know as much about that. I don't have any experience with that. But one of the benefits of LiDAR is that it can penetrate vegetation. It's not actually like seeing through leaves or grass or whatever it may be, but it's shooting so many pulses with the sensor that it's, if you look up and if you're standing underneath a tree on a sunny day and you look up, you can see light kind of filtering through the leaves. LiDAR works the same way. It'll find every little hole in every little space and make its way through the tree. And then instead of just seeing the leaves on top, you get a nice view of the tree trunk, even if you can't see it from where the LiDAR unit is. And it's extremely accurate because a lot of times it's connected to GNSS or GPS receivers. So the location where you are is kind of automatically built into the data. Now, photogrammetry is similar in that it's also 3D modeling, but essentially photogrammetry is creating a 3D model from taking pictures of an object or an area from a bunch of different angles, and then you take it back, and instead of the location data or the spatial data being built in, it is something that you kind of find out in post-processing. You have to add a reference scale and you put it into software, and the software will take all your photos, overlay them, and essentially create a point cloud like you would get from LiDAR, but it's less dense and it's less accurate because it's just based on pictures. However, it's usually looks a lot better than a LiDAR point cloud because it's much higher resolution on the surface, but you're not going to get vegetation penetration or anything like that.
That's really cool. Oh my gosh, I didn't know like that in-depth details about what those are and how they work. That's, oh my gosh, it's so cool. And we had a lot of viewer questions about, the softwares you use to do all that and whether, 3D modeling is even involved. So we're going to come back around to all those things in the viewer questions a lot more. But before we do that, I really want to know what's the coolest or craziest project you've ever gotten to work on?
I think there's a number of different things that come to mind. One thing that was really surprising to me when I started in this position was that there's sinkholes from underground mines, abandoned underground mines all over North Dakota and a number of other states that have underground mining.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we respond to calls from landowners or, sometimes city council members, whoever it might be, that say, hey, we have a sinkhole in this field, or on occasion, you hope this doesn't happen, but in the middle of a road or an active highway or something like that. So
Oh
we have to
yeah.
go out and we use the federal funds that are provided to our agency to repair those areas to no charge to the landowner. So that's something that's been really interesting, is going to sinkholes after they're reported. And sometimes it's, like you could do it with a shovel and 20 minutes, and other times it's, a 20-foot hole. You can't see the bottom and it undercuts one way or another, and, it goes into a old
Whoa.
mine shaft or something like that. So that's definitely one of the most unusual and unexpected things that we see on the job.
Oh my God, I never would have expected that.
Mhm.
Wow. And kind of in the vein of, some challenges, what is the biggest challenge you face in your job?
The biggest challenge is probably software literacy, if you would. There's a number of different softwares out there, and you can use a number of different softwares for any data that you have or what you want to do. And everybody has a different opinion on what software is best. There are definitely some options that everybody kind of agrees upon, and there's some that diverge quite a bit. So being able to open up a program and understand how to use it and what kind of data you need, and what in order to get what you're looking for, that was definitely a challenge for me because I didn't have a huge exposure to a lot of this stuff before I started. So it's kind of an ongoing learning process. And for anybody that's had any experience in GIS or AutoCAD or anything like that, it's pretty overwhelming with the amount of tools and buttons and options. It kind of feels like you're, when you first start out, you're like somebody who's never flown a plane before, and you step into a cockpit and you see all these buttons and controls and knobs, and you're like, how am I ever going to learn what all this does? And you may not, but if you learn what you need in order to get the job done, then you can move on, and you'll learn little other tricks and things as you go.
That's actually a good point, and this was a viewer question I was going to get to later, but since you brought it up, I'll ask it now, and that is, do you need to have computer or tech background or knowledge, previous knowledge going into the job, or, can you learn a lot of that once you get in it?
I think it's a little bit of both. I minored in computer science, so while I am by no means a computer whiz, I had a little bit of coding experience. I did research with the
Ah.
University of Montana that was very coding heavy in Python, so I got a little bit of exposure to that prior to getting into this actual the workplace. But I think it's really helpful. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think there is such a high level of computer literacy across the board compared to how there ever has been before right now,
Yeah.
because everyone's kind of being raised with that exposure. Like, you probably don't have a kid that gets out of high school that doesn't know how to make a PowerPoint pretty easily.
Yeah.
And like 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, that was like a skill you put on a resume. Like, I can use
Right?
PowerPoint. Now it's kind of like, okay, why wouldn't you be able
So?
to? Exactly. So I think that it's not absolutely necessary, but it definitely helps, because the more you use these softwares and the more heavy they get, you will definitely see the back end, the coding side of the program start to poke through in terms of, like GIS. You can get into actually write, like changing little bits of code in order to show what you want on the screen, or
Mm.
AutoCAD, there's all the buttons that you have that you can select from and search for. There's a command line that you can use, kind of abbreviated versions of names of those tools in order to find and use what you're looking for. And although it's not really coding, like if you've worked in the command line or the command prompt and you're on your device, it definitely is a little more intuitive. So I would encourage people to try to get that exposure, but don't disqualify yourself from, like, if you're applying for a job, don't disqualify yourself before you have applied for it or whatever it may be, just because you think you don't know enough. Because most of what I've learned, not anything against my experience in college, because I learned a ton, but most of the stuff that I've learned, or most of the stuff I use every day now, I've learned on the job.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been a common theme with everybody
Hmm.
I talk to is you need to have the base understanding of like the broader meaning of what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Hmm.
And you get a lot of that from school, like understanding what it means, what the application is, but the actual little things you use every day and the tools and the, skill set is often mostly learned on the job, which is good because you don't want to say, well, I don't have that background, I didn't
Hmm.
do a computer science major or minor, and so I shouldn't apply for that job, because you absolutely can. You
Hmm.
can learn a lot of that, and you can, even without that kind of minor, you can do a lot of that even with just a base geology degree. You can try and take classes geared toward that stuff. So yeah, and we'll
Absolutely.
we'll get more into kind of classes and certifications you can look at if you're a student, if you do want to go into this. But again, before we do that, let's finish up the last few pre-viewer questions. One of which is, who do you work with the most often? Like other geologists, engineers, politicians?
I don't think we have anybody in the agency that has the job title of geologist. We have a hydro or
Okay.
hydrologist or hydrogeologist. I think it's hydrologist. He is a geologist, though, essentially. So I work with him on occasion. Mostly engineers, project managers would be kind of
Ah, yeah.
the like 90% of the time. And then I get to have conversations with the commissioners, which are politicians, or, there's a lot of work with administrative staff, especially on the data management side, because we're,
Yeah.
kind of trying to keep things running, keep things organized and accessible for other employees. But yeah, definitely overwhelmingly, it would be like project managers and engineers.
Okay, okay, good to know. And does your work influence decisions at the state level? Or, for example, does it guide land use planning, safety upgrades, or resource management at all?
I would say at the state level, it probably doesn't have much influence. I think that at that level, mostly what I would provide would be like if somebody needs to just see something, like see a map or a figure of some kind, I would probably be the person that they would say, "Hey, can you make this and make it look pretty so that way we can show it to this person and they'll understand." So in that sense, I have maybe a tiny bit of influence, but nothing that I don't think I actually have any direct influence on decisions. With the planning side of it, I would say I definitely have a little bit of influence on just because like the figures, like for construction projects that we have, I have a pretty big role in creating the figures for those that are in our contracts or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
for designs, pre-construction, topography, and features and things like that, and then what we're looking for after construction. But I don't know that it makes a ton of difference in other people's like decision-making processes. I think it's more of just like kind of empirical data or spatial data that
Right.
people want to see, like what's a clean, good, simple way to visualize it most of the time.
Yeah.
So
Well, and kind of in that same vein, but in I guess broader scale, how does your work benefit the general public? Not just your work, but like GIS and
mhm.
geospatial science in general. Like, why is this field important?
I think it provides the same value for the public as it does for, my colleagues in the sense that it's hard to bridge the gap between the data that's out there and collected and somebody who doesn't have any background knowledge being able to comprehend it. And so, you could write a textbook on here's what this means and this is how it has to do with regular life, but maps essentially do that in one picture where it's like, here's this data that we've collected that has something to do with something that you probably have never thought of or don't care about. But if you come across it or you're interested in it and you see a good map, you might become interested in it, or you might start to care about it because there's a good method of visualization that teaches you without you having to read a chapter or do a bunch of research. Like you can look at a good map and have some level of understanding of some topic, whatever it may be. And I think that's a big part of the value that it provides is that it can kind of be a very quick and simple way to attract people to a subject, whether you're trying to influence people's decisions or just inform them or persuade them or whatever, rhetoric it might be that you're looking for. I think that maps can be a really useful tool for showing people things that they have no exposure to and giving them like a really introductory sense of the topic. I'm not doing a great job of articulating what
No,
I'm trying to say, but
no, no, no. It was beautiful. That is such a great point because I feel the same way. As a person on the outside of this field, if you showed me like the text data or the coding or whatever it was that was just in text or number format that eventually went into making the map, I wouldn't know what the heck I was looking at. But if I look at the map, I would have some level of understanding and interest in that.
mhm.
And that's such a powerful thing that we need people to convert that, to bridge that gap of understanding between the people that don't know what the other stuff, the data, the raw data means, to the people that are making big decisions that do impact the public, whether it be to inform decisions or just to inform and educate. But it's so important to bridge that gap. If we didn't bridge that gap, we'd be way less far along in society.
I might be a little biased because I've always been interested in maps and figures, and like good ones. It's really, I just, that kind of thing catches my eye, which I
Oh,
realize
same.
sounds kind of maybe a little nerdy or boring, but I don't know. I
Oh, I
mean,
think
I think a good map is really valuable. So,
oh yeah. Map, figure, any visuals. It's so
mhm.
important for explaining what you're trying to get across. I mean, the age-old saying of like, a picture says 1,000 words or whatever. It's true. I mean, some of these maps probably say way more than 1,000 words. It's just it says so much and it's such a more accessible way of getting information across a lot of the times. And that's so important when we're talking about informing and making informed decisions. So it's 100% super important if there's people out there that are wondering why it matters and if they should go into it.
Mhm.
Yes, you should. It's very helpful. And lastly, before we get to the viewer questions, is are there any common myths or misconceptions about your job that you want to bust?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the field in general, like, geologist comes to mind, and it's kind of a running joke for everybody involved that we just like look at rocks and
Rocks.
stuff.
Yeah.
Which I have two on my desk, so like I can't completely, I can't
I mean, look at my
completely like,
background.
yeah, exactly. You can't completely disregard that one. But yeah, there's definitely a lot more to the field, especially for people that are
Yes.
looking into going into it as like a major or whatever. I would say if you don't like rocks, don't necessarily let that stop you if you're
Yeah.
interested in other things, whether it's natural disasters or, climate or whatever it might be. Like it's definitely worth looking into. I mean, I took a mineralogy class and like I did a little oil and gas stuff at UND when I went there before I transferred. But other than that, I really didn't do much with rocks. Like I was working mostly with earthquakes when I was in the later years of my studies and earthquakes and coding. So like that's two really cool things to me. In the basic sense, like earthquakes have to do with rocks, but most of the data that work that I was doing, I wasn't like going out and like licking rocks or whatever, or like doing strikes and dips all the time or whatever it might
Yes.
be. So
Yeah,
that's the
no.
one that comes to mind.
It's so true. I mean, the people that think it's just rocks, like, I think there's two misconceptions wrapped into one. One, it's not just rocks, there's so much more to it, like you
Mhm.
just pointed out. But two, rocks are also like misunderstood because they mean so much more than people.
Yes.
They think, oh, it's just rocks, you just look at rocks or you just lick rocks. But it's like
Hmm.
that rock, the composition of that rock, the physical features of that rock, the biological, whatever's preserved in that rock biologically, it tells like potentially millions of years of a story
Hmm.
that can give us so much information about Earth's evolution, life's evolution, climate evolution, the future
Hmm.
of climate. It can tell us so many things. What I mean, my whole PhD was done in a lab mixing chemicals together to see kind of how certain rocks form, which
Hmm.
was rock related, but very much not in the field, not the
Hmm.
traditional sense that people think geologists go, hit rocks in the field with a rock hammer, and there's so much more to it. And with you, I mean, you're the data guy. You put these maps together and you use all this data and coding. And speaking of that, a lot of the viewer questions were geared toward kind of the coding side of things and a little bit about, kind of the AI side of things. With AI moving into the picture, a lot of the viewers were curious about how that's affecting your field and your work specifically. So, on that, where do you see the future of geospatial technology with the emergence of AI? One asking, how will new AI capabilities and planned future remote sensing satellites disrupt the field?
Well, I'm fairly new to the position. I started a little over a year ago, so I don't have a ton of insight on the future because I'm also just trying to figure out what it's all about to an extent, or still. But I would say I've got a little bit of exposure to AI in the field. I think that, like most things, it's probably going to definitely become more integrated, more influential in the sense that it makes things like on the job learning or learning a software quite a bit easier because you might be able to type in a phrase of telling the computer or the software what you want to do, and the AI can figure out what tool you need and tell you how to use it. So it's saving that, 15 Google searches you do to try to find the name of a tool in AutoCAD because you don't know what it's called, but it probably is there somewhere. Like that type of thing. I'm sure that it's definitely going to be more involved. I don't use any AI. I think a lot of people that are coding do. I'm not really actively coding in my job, which is good and bad because it wasn't my favorite thing to do, but also it's, at least for me, it's not necessarily like riding a bike where you can kind of do it after 5 years and it takes you a minute and then you're back to normal. Like I can understand code when I'm reading it for the languages that I've been exposed to, but like if somebody was like, "Hey, write a program to do this," I probably would. It would take me a lot of time because it's been a couple years
Ah.
since I've done it. So, but I have had exposure to Python, Java, and HTML. Python's really the only one that I would probably see myself using. A lot of the stuff that I use with like Esri products are pretty heavily Python based. That's like ArcGIS Pro, ArcMap, ArcGIS Online, whatever. So I think like having Python experience, even if you're doing a little online class in your own time, do something with it if you're planning on going into the GIS world, just because that will be, I think it'll be really helpful. It was helpful for me for sure. So
Yeah, good to know. Okay, yeah, we had questions about like, do you need to code with the position you're in
mm,
and like, what do you use? But yeah, it sounds like you don't do that too extensively. So that's
mm,
like, for those of you who are wondering, I don't have any coding experience. Could I go into this? Yeah, you might want a little bit, but you can also learn that on the job if needed. But it sounds like
mm-hmm.
it's not super heavily intertwined with what you do, at least at the moment. So that's
Yeah.
good to know.
No, you could do a ton without it. I mean, 99% of what I'm doing, I wouldn't need to do to use code for. It's just sometimes I do those little bits because it's like a shortcut or something. But yeah, overall, don't really need it, but I would. It's a good idea to have it.
Now that you mention ArcGIS and stuff, some other viewers were wondering, do you use ArcGIS, QGIS? Do you have a preference? Is there something else you use and why?
ArcGIS Pro is what I use pretty heavily for GIS software. I know some people around that use a QGIS. I don't really know of anybody else that uses anything else, but the GIS world, at least my experience is it's pretty dominated by Esri, which is ArcGIS, who makes ArcGIS. But walking into the position that I have now, the agency had already kind of integrated Esri products, ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS, ArcMap, ArcGIS Enterprise. Also, that's what I had exposure to in school. So it was kind of a no-brainer in that sense. I haven't really used anything else. But yeah, I guess I can't really say if it's better than anything else because I haven't really used anything else. So,
Yeah, no, it seems like the main one that I hear people use in this field. And for those of viewers that aren't familiar, what is ArcGIS? Like, would you just describe it as just mapping software?
yeah, essentially, in simplest terms, you can pull data in, lay it over a map, adjust it, change it, save it, export it, put it into a nice, pretty map, or, you can pull in pretty large data sets. There's an infinite number of things that you can do. But yeah, essentially mapping software, GIS, and then the ARC part is just that's an Esri thing. So it's just a different version. There's a bunch of GIS softwares. But yes, it's a product for mapping software.
And a lot of viewers were also curious how much is done in kind of the 3D or virtual reality realm of your work, if any, and is this a promising field to go into?
I think it's definitely a promising field to go into. There's a lot of potential with, that's one thing I didn't mention earlier in the AI conversation. Drones and actually doing the data collection, I would say, is going to become way more AI heavy and probably already is than sitting on the computer doing your own work. Drones use it a lot for, creating flight plans. You tell it, this is the area that I want you to map. And a lot of the softwares that drones run on their control stations will just like develop a flight plan that has the overlap between photos, dialed into a certain percentage. It figures out how many photos it's going to take, how long it's going to take, how much battery it's going to use, depending on wind and temperature or whatever. But like, it does all those things for you. There's a lot that goes into learning how to fly a drone, but once you do it because of AI and some high level coding, it's very easy generally for the pilot. So like I think that
Oh.
AI and 3D modeling are going to fit together much more heavily than some of the other responsibilities that I have. So yes, very promising, important. I don't use it a ton right now, but it's something that we're getting into. I've processed LiDAR data that's been collected by other people, but we are hoping to get a LiDAR unit of our own in the near future and a camera that's capable of photogrammetry. So we'll be able to do our own 3D modeling rather than just having somebody else do it for us and then processing the data. So we're going to do way more of it. It's going to be a big part of what we do. I'm super excited for that. But right now, the extent of our 3D modeling is walking around with a survey rod and taking survey shots of a surface and then, bringing those points in, adjusting them on the computer so that way they're right where you need them to be, and then having like a three-dimensional topographic surface. So essentially the purpose of that for us is we'll do it before a construction project and we'll see what the area looks like before we touch it. And then after the fact, we'll do another survey, whether it's a stockpile or, a whole construction area. We'll be able to say, okay, this is the volume of material that's been added or removed or both from this area. This is the new topographic surface. That's a big part of what I do, is those kind of like post-construction topography.
Oh.
So that's kind of the extent of what we do in 3D right now. It's a pretty common thing for engineers to do, I believe. But it's one of the coolest things is for me being able to, go out and be the one that actually does the initial survey, doing that analysis, doing some inspecting and being involved in the actual construction project. And then it gets done. And then I get to do the post-construction survey as well and be the one that finds the numbers and then passes those numbers along. Like I get to see the construction project digitally and, in person throughout the whole process from beginning to end. I don't know how common that is
That
in
is
the
so
field,
cool.
being able to
Yeah.
do both the field stuff and the computer stuff. But I think it's huge. It's my favorite part of what I do probably is being able to do both. So,
Oh, that is so cool. And what you said about the like AI assistants and drone piloting, I
mm,
didn't know that was going to be a thing. I had an internship with USGS like ages ago. I mean, this was like 2018, so I don't know how far before any of that assistance came into play, but I remember being very nervous, all of us being very nervous about the drone piloting. And
mm,
it was like, okay, let's like land it very carefully. And
oh yeah,
yeah, that sounds like now it's becoming a lot easier and a lot, I guess, a lower barrier to entry, which is good for students that want to get into this. But that is so funny. I've also, thought about getting a drone for filming at some
hmm,
point, and I'm like terrified of the learning curve, but that's good to know.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Okay, so finally getting to the more student targeted viewer questions. Hopefully, these will answer a lot of the student questions or questions that will help students go into this career if they're interested. That is, what kind of education or background prepared you for this role, and what advice would you give to students that would want to pursue this career? Whether it be, what should their highest degree be? What major should they do? Should they get any certifications? Stuff like that.
I have a bachelor's degree in geosciences and a minor in computer science, and I would say that's a great place to start. There's a lot of graduate opportunities. Obviously, you know that about what you can do in the field. I don't think it's necessary for what I'm doing, although it's, definitely, it's never going to hurt to have more schooling. The computer science minor was huge for me. Part of the reason I chose it at the time, honestly, was because it was like the least amount of credits I had to do to get a minor. But it was one of the best decisions I've made regarding my career. Like it was awesome. It was super helpful. So if that's something that you're interested in or you can do, could not recommend it more. And geoscience is probably not the only degree that you could go into and end up in GIS. It's just that's what I did and it worked for me. And I think that's what a lot of people do or something similar.
So yeah, I know when I was an undergrad, a lot of my colleagues, friends, other students were wondering if they should there was like some sort of GIS certificate.
Yes, sorry,
Did
I
you guys
forgot to
have,
mention
yeah,
that.
no worries. Yeah, I don't know what that is or if it's helpful.
That's something that sounds like it's getting more and more common in people's degrees is to go out and get a certificate in a certain type of skill. I didn't do that, but I know people who did. Absolutely think it's helpful. I didn't have a ton of GIS exposure in college, not as much as I would have liked now that I'm in it, obviously. But if I went into something else, probably wouldn't make a difference. So it's all about what you end up doing. But I think it's a great idea. Anything you can do to get more exposed and be able to put that on paper to say, I've done this, to show somebody like you have credentials. And then another thing I also forgot to mention, I think there are a lot of places where you can get 2-year degrees for land surveying or something like that. So if the survey equipment stuff and drone piloting stuff really interests you, then that's definitely something to look into because I completely understand not everybody wants to go to school for 4 years. Not everybody wants to spend the money to go to a research university. Like, I think there's tons of validity in that. And if you don't want to do that, then don't. If you're not sure that you want to do that, then don't, because it is a big, financial commitment. So if that's something that interests you, I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, that's a great thing to mention because I didn't even know, you have to have a bachelor's, a master's, just having
Mm,
2-year degree instead of getting that 4-year bachelor's. That's can be really, helpful for some
mhm,
people to know that might not have the money or the, time to go to school for 4 years. So that could be a really helpful thing for some people that might be interested in this field and going
sure.
into this work. That's awesome. And lastly, what are the most common employers or like kinds of companies that are hiring GIS workers?
All kinds. I don't know if there's a most common, but there's contractors, all kinds of different contractors, environmental, engineering firms or consulting firms that want people that use AutoCAD, GIS, different things like that. There's state agencies, obviously. There's a number of state agencies. We have a state committee that's basically the geospatial people from a whole number of agencies that we meet. So there's a bunch of different agencies that have those needs. There's a number of nonprofits, like especially conservation organizations that look for GIS professionals. And then there's also for-profit kind of not necessarily contractors, but private companies. I mean, for anybody who likes to spend time in the outdoors, they've probably heard of Onyx Maps or Go Hunt or Basemap or any number of different mapping softwares, which is basically like a little kind of pocket version of GIS that you can carry around. So you can get a little exposure to GIS using those applications, but you can also get a job working for them, being a GIS professional. So I would say pretty much all like kind of general fields of the private and public sector in terms of like types of organizations, somebody's using GIS now.
Yeah.
I think that's only going to grow. And I would say it's the same, maybe not with surveying, but drones. Everybody's using drones, and I mean everybody.
Okay.
I did a lot of work for the railroad in my previous job, and they told us at one point, one of the companies told us about how their drone program was expanding, and they had like, I didn't even know they had this many departments throughout the railroad company, but there was like over 100 different departments in their company that was using drones and stuff that I had never even thought of. So that's another thing. Like everybody's looking for them, everybody's using them, whether that goes even wider, whether it's real estate or all the things I already mentioned, or anything.
God,
Photography, for example. I mean,
yeah.
yeah. So
So true. I mean, I remember even when I was an undergrad before, I think drones became the big thing. I remember GIS being like this thing that all our professors were like, if you want something that can be applied to a lot of different fields, you can go work for a lot of different kinds of employers with that kind of background and expertise. And that can be, even if you don't want to do that specifically, like it's a good fallback to have those skills, because you can, it's like being an engineer. Like you're definitely gonna have options, like that's awesome. That's good to know. And the drones thing is good to know. That sounds super cool too. Oh my
oh, it
gosh,
is.
I'm just so jealous.
It's awesome. And
And
one
then,
thing I would quickly
yeah.
add, sorry, is
No, go for it.
if you have a job already and you're looking at this, or you have something lined up, or you end up getting a job and they're not using GIS or drones, but it's something you like or something you're interested in, I can almost bet you money that you can find a way to apply. Obviously, like you don't want to just do it just to get a drone because it's fun, but like you can most likely find a way to improve somebody's work, whether it's yours or a colleague's or just somebody in your organization or something that they're looking for. You can almost always find a way to provide value to wherever you're at with GIS or a drone. So keep that in mind. You don't necessarily have to go somewhere that already uses it in order to integrate it into your work.
Oh, that's such a great point. Oh my gosh, you can always make things better with drones, guys.
Yes,
Go
pretty
work for
much.
people and then tell them that they need a drone and show
Yes,
them why.
yes.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, last couple questions I love to ask is what is your least favorite part of the job and what's your favorite?
Favorite part of the job, I kind of already mentioned, being able to go out and collect the data and then process it in the field, and then also produce deliverables from that. Like seeing that whole process, one of the terms they use in mining that I think is similar in this regard is cradle to grave, like beginning to end. I think that it's really cool to be able to do that. That's one of the things that I wished that I could have done more in my previous position. Was I would go out and collect the data, but then I'd send it off to somebody and then I never knew what happened with it. And being somebody who's
Yeah.
pretty like data analytical minded, I wanted to see how that data looked, and I wanted to see how you manipulated it and did what you wanted to do with it, and or just visualized it or made it into something that was pretty and nice for other people to use. Like that is my favorite part for sure. Whether it's, and I mean obviously flying drones is pretty awesome, but like overall, that's definitely my favorite part. Least favorite part, I there's really nothing major that comes to mind, and I know that sounds silly, but I can't really express how much this job just like suits me. I really enjoy it. I would say if I had to pick something, I would say the fact that I have to go to these construction sites and I have to watch these guys work, and I can't hop in a piece of equipment myself. Because I got to do some of
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I got to do some of that at my last job, and it was a lot of fun running equipment, excavators, and skid steers, and whatever it might be. So I don't have a ton of experience. I am by no means an operator, but there's some cool stuff out there that I wish I could. I wish I could hop on the controls for.
That's a pretty good least favorite part of the job kind of
But
to have. That's awesome. It's good to know that you love what you do. I think this is hopefully going to be really inspiring to those that might be out there and wondering if they should go into this. I know I already I've been convinced.
good,
This sounds
good.
so cool.
Just
And
adding
I,
competition for myself.
yes, yes, you are. Well, for me, I have always been in the more research side of things. So to hear more
Mm,
about that applied side is so interesting to me. And so all these interviews have been just so informative to me and just so cool to hear about it. It makes me really want to go out there and like do these things, you
yeah.
know? And I love that you mentioned getting to see the beginning and the end of the project. That
Hmm.
is something that's one of the reasons I love academia and research because I can collect the data, I can analyze it, I can interpret it, and I can kind of see that to the end. Whereas,
Hmm.
a lot of applied positions, sometimes you just collect it and send it off to the other people. But it's good to know that you're in a position now where you can do the whole
Hmm.
thing, and that's so cool.
I understand a little bit about where you're coming from with research, but I will say the good part about construction stuff is that there has to be an end date, and
Oh yeah.
research is like it never ends. Eventually you have to forget the closure and pass it on to the next, PhD or master's
Yeah.
student or whatever it is. So, and that can I know that it can be liberating, but it can also kind of hurt because I had to pass on what I was working on to a master's student. And I was like, I didn't get as far as I wanted to.
I
Like I
know.
wish I didn't
And
have to stop. But
everything in
construction,
research, you
beginning
have
and
an
end.
end. Yeah. Well, and everything in research you have, the answers you get kind of just lead to more questions
Hmm.
instead of
Yes,
an
absolutely.
answer, which I love. And there's a lot of people with brains that love that. They just want to go find more questions. But
Hmm.
if you want an answer and an ending, there
Yes.
are more applied fields that might be better for you.
Yes. I like a
That's
little bit of
awesome.
both. And the
Yeah.
closure part is nice sometimes. But
Yeah.
also, yes, sometimes it is really fun to entangle yourself with the questions that
Yeah.
have yet to be answered. So,
Absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you again for coming on. This was so cool for me.
good. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. It helps me appreciate what I do more when I have to tell other people about it. So,